Greetings! In this video I'll be painting a captain from the Iron Snakes chapter. This chapter was requested by a viewer. If you have any requests, let me know and I'll add them to my list. The request mentioned an officer, and I looked into some lore about the chapter soon afterwards. I found mention of an Ithacan sea lance in the Sabbat World's Crusade book. I recreated it in Blender and arranged some parts to print out. The body failed to print 3 times for various reasons, but I eventually got it working and assembled a captain with jump pack in a running pose, as if he's about to lunge in with the lance. I really like the pose, but there's no real golden angle to view it from, so it can look a little bit weird sometimes. But after all that, I prime the model with my usual black primer through my airbrush. Now onto painting properly, starting with a metal colour using gunmetal grey. Fairly simple here, just 2 coats over most of the model. Everywhere that was either going to be a metallic armour colour or the actual metal bits like the power pack exhausts or tubing on the helmet. I was fairly careful, so I only needed to clean up a few places with Black Legion. I then moved on to Rhinox hide to base coat the leather bits. There are a few straps around the legs on this model too, which are also painted in. Sticking with the leather, I used some Skrag brown to do some nice wavy patterns on the holster, helping to add texture to the otherwise flat piece. The edges of the straps and belt also received some attention, though with a bit less precision to show a bit of wear. Deathclaw brown finishes the leather, used to dot in small highlights on the Skrag brown, helping to emphasise random bits of damage to keep the surface interesting. With the leather finished, I moved over to Ulthuan grey to base coat in the white panels. This is meant to be both pauldrons and the left knee, though I also used it for the cord on the torso. Onto the blue now, using Macragge blue. I was unsure which colour to do the tabard. I've seen some veterans painted with red before, but I wondered how a blue would look, especially with the cord. I think this colour matches the Grecian inspiration nicely. The company marking and the chapter armorial were also painted in. To highlight the blue, I started with Altdorf guard blue. I apply this as a thin layer to bring up the brightness on parts that are most exposed to light and the upwards facing bits. These 2 colours are quite similar, but with a few coats, you can definitely tell the difference. To finish the blue, I used Hoeth blue, and apply this over the tabard only, using some thin horizontal lines. I figured this would add texture and make it look more like cloth instead of armour, like some rough stitching or something. I think it works well. Now for the red trim, starting with Mephiston red. I applied a few thin coats over the pauldron trim and eye lenses, and at this point I noticed I hadn't painted in the right pauldron properly, so I painted in the trim and then went back to Ulthuan grey to clean it up. Now onto Evil Sunz Scarlet to brighten up the red bits. I left Mephiston red in the recesses and anywhere that isn't in direct light. I did a thin pass over the handle on the lance too, adding a shine along the top. Next was Wold Rider Red, doing a smaller area on the eye lenses, and a sharp edge highlight over the pauldron trims. I also did a thin pass over the weapon handle, like with the previous colour. Lugganath Orange finishes the red, applied where I wanted a central glow to be on the eyes and wrist lights. Onto the gold details now, trying out some Dragon's Gold from 2 thin coats. I've been wanting a gold that behaves like the metal colour range, and apparently this gold is meant to perform better than Citadel's Retributor armour, whilst having the same colour. I did a few thin coats over the details I wanted gold, but it was too yellow for my liking. Retributor armour has a little red mixed in that this colour seems to be lacking. It feels closer to Skullcrusher brass. But it could be a bad pot, or maybe the online conversion charts were being a bit too generous with these 2 colours. To address the tone of the gold, I used some Rhinox Flesh Shade to add some warmth to the colour details. I applied this fairly thick, though very thick, over the Sea Lance blade. I wanted to go this strong to try and get a similar finish to the reference I have for the lance. After the wash had dried, I used some glistening gold to apply some highlights to the gold bits. This was done similar to previous passes, especially with the thin line along the lance, which follows the highlight that I did with the red earlier. I then went back to Black Legion to clean up the weapon casing around the blade, specifically the bits where I went over with the silver and the gold. Still cleaning up, I went back to Ulthuan Grey and cleaned up around the red trim. I then switched to Mechanicus Standard Grey to paint in some edge highlights and a few little scratches over the Sea Lance casing. Now to highlight the silver, both the armour and the metal details, using Duraluminium. I applied this over the raised surfaces and did some rough passes over the less exposed areas and tried to add some scratchy detailing. Now finally onto a black enamel wash. This specific paint's meant for panel lines, but it works great as a wash over silver and many other colours. But I've kept it fairly reserved this time around, only going over the silver, white and red, while avoiding the gold and the cloth. I did apply it over the cord around the cloth, as the transition between that and the blue cloth needed some shading. After the wash was dry, I painted in the base details and applied my usual basing mix. I painted the base rim black, then sealed everything in with some ultimate varnish. And here we have it! A captain from the Iron Snakes chapter, 3rd Company. I'm really happy with this one. Everything came out how I was hoping, though there's always some room for improvement. I think the weaknesses are in the metallic highlights and the lack of the glow in the jump pack exhausts. I could have gone back in with some bright metallic colours to bring up the shine after the enamel, but that was hard to gauge before a matte varnish. I could have also gone for a different silver tone for the armour compared to the actual metal bits, but I was focusing more on the fancy bits around the model. As for the jump pack, I've not found a method that makes something look like it's glowing that I think would suit this. Many methods I've seen people suggest either require the rest of the model to be darker to compensate, or to have it so the effect only looks correct when flooded with light. The exhausts are always going to be in some kind of shadow, and seeing a shadow cast on something that's meant to be glowing is a bit weird to me. I could get around this by making some 3D fire effects, but I'm not really a fan of that look. It might just be me, but I prefer paint jobs that only include things that are solid. And you can't paint smoke, for example, but some models have those blobby effects that are meant to look like smoke, but they just come across as cartoony. I've seen some really cool examples online where people have guns with 3D muzzle flashes, massive exhaust plumes, but it looks really busy and can really detract from the rest of the model if overdone. Ranting aside, I am very pleased with this model. The pose came out perfect in my eyes, but as I mentioned, it's a bit difficult to get a good angle on it that does it justice. I was going for a pose that indicated he was using the jump pack to speed himself along, doing little jumps between outcrops and debris that let him gain ground really quickly. That scene from the Halo 5 intro sequence springs to mind, where they're doing that weird cliff descent thing. But anyway, that's all I've got for this one. If you have any requests, let me know in the comments. Or if there's something you'd do differently if you're approaching this paint job, that'd be cool too. I should also mention that the basing for this guy was some random bits of plastic, a rock from one of the Space Wolves kits, and a skull. But as for the paints I used, I have a basing video that goes over how I do it if you want to check that out. But yeah, hope you stick around for the next one.